Okay, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. It's a little shortly after 5 o'clock. This is our town hall for the Unified Water Infrastructure Plan. So this is the meeting, public meeting portion of the discussing the prioritization process. But just wanted to thank all of you for making the effort to come and join in person. And also, I believe this is being broadcast virtually. So also appreciate those joining virtually. And then just as we get started, there is a QR code here that's on the screen if you want to select that. That's a great way to submit your comments. And the format of this presentation, Eric is going to be talking about the prioritization process. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer. And so if Eric won't be taking questions during the presentation. And so if you submit a question with the QR code, and on the bottom right, every slide will have the link to the web page where you can also get to the comments. Some of your questions may be answered during the presentation, but we'll cover all of the questions and comments at the end. And then there will also be opportunities to make a public comment. And then when you click that QR code, it goes to this web page where it does have the button to submit a comment. And again, when you click on that QR code, go to those comments. This is the page. Oh, sorry, I'm not clicking ahead there. This is the page that is displayed. And so, that's kind of what that would look like. So we just really encourage you to submit your comments, and also to note, if you have questions and other comments that don't get addressed during this meeting, this will probably be live through the end of the month and maybe into November. And so if there was something that didn't get addressed today, there's still an opportunity to get that submitted. Sorry. Okay, and then just for an overview of this meeting, the purpose is just to present the information and receive public comments. And, and this is specific on the prioritization process for the Unified Water Infrastructure Plan. And we'll probably, the acronym, we just call that the UWIP. So when we say UWIP, that's what we're referring to. But, we're just doing introductions. Eric's going to talk about the goals and the background, or I'll cover some of that as well. And then Eric will cover the prioritization process, what's been drafted to this point, and then take comments and questions at the end. And, I'm a member of the Water Development Coordinating Council. I'm with the Division of Drinking Water. And I'm not sure if did I introduce myself? No. Oh, so sorry about that. I'm Nathan Lundstad, the director for the Division of Drinking Water. And so I am one of the members for the Water Development Coordinating Council, and along with other state agencies and other entities that make up that council, and that council is defined in statute. And the goals of the Coordinating Council are also defined in statute. And right now, there's several, but we're focusing on the engage part. That's where we're having the town hall, trying to engage the public and getting feedback and comments. And House Bill 280, which was from the legislative session in 2024, outlined the process for the UWIP. And these are some of the milestones and dates that are set in statute. And you were right. You can see where we're at today. There's a lot that's been done, but there's a lot left to do, and a lot of public engagement and coordination left in this process. And historically, with funding for infrastructure projects, there's been multiple paths for entities to get funding. There's the different divisions, Division of Drinking Water, which is my division. There's Division of Water Quality, Division of Water Resources, and those are, and then also others, direct appropriations from the legislators. But a lot of these entities are in different departments, different agencies, and so there's been limited coordination and communication for that funding, and maybe also an incomplete understanding of what the infrastructure needs are across the state, because there isn't that coordination between the different agencies. So, part of the UWIP goals is to make this a better process, create a more comprehensive, prioritized list of water projects, and centralize the application process. So an application would be submitted, and that would be considered and then sent out to the appropriate agency that would have the funding. And so it really coordinates, or it really enhances that coordination among the state agencies, and it helps with the transparency and efficiency with the funding. And it also just aligns all the state water projects under a common goal, and able to get recommendations from all parties to make sure we're moving in a unified direction.
All right, thanks, Nathan. I'm Eric Dixon. I'm with the Division of Water Resources, and one of my tasks is kind of helping this whole UWIP process, and we're learning a lot as we go. So, and this is our guinea pig public meeting. So if we have some hiccups and stuff here, just work with us, okay? So we have done a few things, and this sheet up here kind of shows the things that were done earlier this year. We had some outreach, and then we had April 7th through May 9, where we requested that people submit their projects, and we didn't have any. Basically, we just had to have them do it through Google Forms and spreadsheets. And then we have a consultant team where they took all those and compiled them. And our goal is to not have to do that again. Okay, we'll get in a little bit of how we're looking at doing that differently. And then on June 30th, we had a technical memo that kind of explained some of the stuff that was tied into these agency plans. And there's 3 relevant agencies. Nathan talked about all the entities that are part of the WDCC, but for the UWIP, there's 3 what are called relevant agencies, which is water resources, drinking water, and water quality. And those are the ones that are kind of combining the efforts for this funding. There's other things like CIB and agriculture and food that have funding for water things, but they kind of have enough other things where, like I said, the 3 relevant agency are the 3 that are united in this, I always want to say Unified Water Infrastructure Project. And then October 8th is the document was sent out. And again, if you go to that bottom right-hand link, there's 3 tabs. The one right there on the far right, review process draft, you can see the PDF that basically has everything we're talking about tonight. Whoops. So yeah, we're going to be covering a lot of information, but if you go to that link, it has, I think it's like 14 pages long, kind of lines out everything, describes things in detail. And as you're reviewing that, if you have comments too, you can get on that link and continue to submit comments, like Nathan said, till end of this month or into November. So we compiled all those initial submittals, and this is kind of a summary of the information. The dots are just kind of show we were really happy that we got a distribution throughout the state. It wasn't just the Wasatch Front or just the rural areas. We got a good distribution of where those all came from. So we felt really good about that. There's the numbers up there that came from that initial submission. And that showed the total project costs. And this is, we know it doesn't include everything. We couldn't get every project in that first round, but we felt like we got a great start. And it's showing us that a little under $18 billion needed over the next 20 plus years for water infrastructure. And then as we had that broken down into, the first 1 to 2 years, and then we had a 3 to 5 and a 6 to 10, and then 11 to 20, and beyond that. But as we look at that first 2 years, it was about 840 total. So we just kind of simplified that and said each year is going to need about $420 million of projects based on what everybody submitted. and that is the requested funding. The total projects, it's not the total for the overall is 5.8 billion from state fundings is what people are expecting would be requested, but for the first 2 years, 420 million each of those years. And this kind of shows how it's broken down into the different relevant agencies. And so we've got the submitted projects, and then we've got that that column called small community allowance, because we know that there's a lot of smaller communities that might not have looked far in or don't have the capabilities or the power and hours to kind of look into that, where they're just kind of doing what's needed. So we had this is described in the PDF in the link, but we call it a small community allowance, where we it was based off of you guys are. It's based off either drinking water or water quality. They kind of had a system set up to kind of estimate how much is going to be needed for these smaller communities. So we kind of did that, and then we kind of compared it to the list. And if some of these smaller communities were in there, we kind of took them off, so we didn't feel like we tried to eliminate feeling like we're doubling things. We're kind of get it as accurate as we could. And when you add those together, what was submitted and the allowance, that's where the $421 million for those first 2 years. So now we're just calling it for this next coming fiscal year funding request. That's based on the information that was provided. And this graph kind of shows over the next, what was submitted for the next 20 years. And you can see the bumps in the graph. That first one's years 1 and 2, and then it bumps up for years 3, 4, 5, and then down for 6 through 10. And we felt like we got a pretty good idea for those first 10 years. Once we get past 10 years, we understand that a lot of entities haven't looked far beyond that, so that's why it kind of drops there. We know as those get closer, they identify things and things, it'll come up. So that's just kind of a look at the next what was submitted with that initial submission. So the prioritization process, this is kind of a slide that our consultants have put together, which kind of breaks it out into these 3 phases. That's what we'll spend the next little bit going through. So the first phase is what we call this provisional scoring. That's where we took all the information that was submitted, and we gave them scores for different. And this is it's all based on what was required in the House Bill 280 from 2024, and then there were some modifications and cleanup items in the House Bill 285 from 2025. So taking all those criteria and giving some scores, we'll kind of go through those a little bit here later of what those meant. And I mentioned the first round we did it was kind of labor intensive. And we're working right now to set up, there's this, what's called the Utah Project Portal. It's a portal that's already in place. It's been used for community impact board projects in some regions. And we're working with the consultants that have set this up to add the UWIP. And our intent and goal is to kind of have that ready by late October, early November, so that we're going to take everything we've got and put it into that, so that the people that have already put stuff in, that you're not going to have to resubmit, you're not going to have to re-enter everything. We'll want you to verify it and things, those that have already put stuff in. But then it will also give them the opportunity and capabilities to go in and update it. If they reprioritize things, they can change those around and do what they need to. And then annually, the relevant agencies will take a chance. We'll say this is the cutoff date for this next year, and we'll look at everything that's been submitted at that point and do that annually. But then we're not having to everybody. It'll be already in the database and just need updated and things. And then provisional scoring, we kind of these criteria are, like I mentioned, are based on some different criteria that are in the House bills. That said, you need to make sure you consider this, and so we kind of narrowed it down to these 6 items, and then discussions with the consultants and all the people all the groups that were on this committee for helping prepare the UWIP. We kind of gave some different rankings and came up with a weight for each of these items. So, for example, and we're going to go through each one of those. So, yeah, here's the 6, and we're just going to go through each of them kind of. And again, all this information is in the PDF. If you look at that prioritization PDF that's linked on the page down in the bottom right hand. And also note that these are kind of what we're setting for this year, or what we're proposing being established for this year. Those could change each year based on what we learned from the process. This is a brand new thing, so we might look into it a year or two and say, we really need to, we overweighted this or underweighted this, and then each of these items has a different scoring criteria for example, the hardship. We're using the local MAGI percent, and based on where each entity falls in their submission, when they submit their information, they get a score for the hardship. And then this is for the critical, is it a public health issue, a safety or regulatory issue that's critical, or not. They get a score for those. Water efficiency, is the project going to make more efficient use of the water, based on the higher scores down to, if nothing was even entered, or they didn't flag that there wasn't any efficiency out of it, because everything, and we understand everything's not going to get the top score and everything, but we tried to balance the weights and the things so that the projects that kind of had the best criteria for state funds would kind of rise to the top. Design, is it just a concept right now, or have they got real accurate cost estimates, and have been put together in other plans where it's moved pretty far along and it's got design concepts rather than just conceptual ideas. And then this is one that we thought was very important. How important is it to the applicant? And we don't want to be the ones telling them what their priorities should be based on all the other criteria. If they have something that they want to be the top criteria, we don't want to say, no, this should be your higher priority. So kind of looking at those different things, give some scores for those. And I don't know if you noticed, there was several thousand projects submitted, but there was only a few hundred entities. Some entities submitted a couple hundred projects because they're big communities that have a lot of projects, and some were smaller communities and entities where they have one or two projects. So the priority, we couldn't just do the top 5 because somebody that might have 200, that's what the percentage is in there for. Also, it's not just their top 1. We know they might have a few in there. And then this is one that we knew, there's always a concern of, well, is it just the big cities are going to get it because of their demands and the people, or is it just the rural community? We wanted to make sure that rural communities were not left out, and so this kind of takes into the criteria a mix of population along with the funding needs, because we know that some of the bigger communities don't need much help with funding projects. So that's kind of what this criteria was helping with. Then all those projects were divided into different infrastructure types. And then those types were divided out into the 3 relevant agencies. Water resources, kind of got the water supply for water irrigation and just secondary water and agriculture. Drinking water got it nice and easy. They only get one item. So, but if you look into the details, they have a large portion that the drinking water is not the least expensive up there. I mean, it's expensive to get all that treatment and everything. And then water quality, they got the ones that you can see listed there. And so then that's how the projects were all divided out and given out to the agencies. And these were put into the relevant agency plans. Those relevant agency plans are kind of the basis for the UWIP. So that's phase 1. Then it moves into phase 2, where the relevant agencies get all those projects. They take those, they kind of look at them, and I think this will probably evolve over time, where the agencies are able to. This year was kind of a time crunch, and we're still. It's going to be a process in development as we go. Like I said, as we go through it over the years, and the intent is for the agencies to look at it, make sure the information's there's that needed to score it and accurately give it those rankings and all those criteria, and then coordination with the entities or making any adjustments that are needed if those are required, and then take those and implement them into the agency plans. And the agency plans are updated annually. The agency plans are updated annually. The UWIP is required to be updated at least every 4 years. So and that'll be a learning process as we go, if it needs it more often or not, but that's what the code currently says. So then the phase 3, and that's kind of where we're at now, is the funding prioritization. We needed to come up with, okay, we've got all these projects and they've got scores. Now what do we do with it? How do we, the two questions that we basically need to answer is, what's the total funding that's needed? And how should the Water Infrastructure Fund, which is another component of that House Bill 280, we're not going to get into it more, this is the prioritization for the UWIP, but how are those funds going to be distributed, or with the recommended distribution to meet those funding needs? And then the information, it's got the list A through E. We'll go through those. What are the things that are looked at and evaluated in prioritizing? And then based on that information from that prioritization process, the WDCC will then make some recommendations to the legislature of, here's our recommendation of how much funding we should be putting into the Water Infrastructure Fund. So the prioritization criteria, these are the 4 that are kind of laid out. We'll go through each of those, but one is based on the MAGI, and the purpose of that is to focus on making sure that the entities are doing as much as they can with their whatever process they use to get the funds in for the water infrastructure projects. Those are being implemented first before they're coming to the state for additional funds. And then it talks about it. The second one is this provisional score threshold. As we look at those projects and look at the scores, kind of, is there a point in those scores where it's like, we feel like above this point are ones that are ready for funding. So they're well developed and they're good quality projects. And then we also looked at maximum funding limitations, so that those mega projects don't just suck up every penny the minute the funding is made available. And we'll get into what those criteria are on that. And then there's HB 285 requirements that a capital asset management plan has to be in place for those entities that's applicable for. So this is a busy page. We'll try to make it make sense here for you. This is based on what was submitted, and the 420 million-ish for this first year. And that's what this blue line is. And it starts here at the 420. And as we get out, and it says on the bottom line, we've got this provisional score. As the score gets higher and higher, some of the projects weren't meeting those scores. So here's what funding is needed to meet those provisional scores. That's what this dark blue line is. Then the green line is how that's adjusted if we say, looking at the entities and say, oh, they're not charging the full MAGI that we feel they should be. So let's adjust that down to if they were charging that, and that brings the funding request down to this green line. And then this blue line is that when you reduce it down to, well, the bigger projects are only allowed so much percentage of their project to be from this WIF grant or other WIF funding. So, for example, let's say $100 million was awarded or was provided for grants through the WIF. That gets this up to this gray line. And then with kind of funding that's it's not always right at 100, but as we looked at the past and with loans that are out and repayment for those loans, basically funding processes that are already in place, roughly 100 million are provided by that. So those would bring it up to this many projects could be provided for, and that's showing that. And this, we're not using this to base that we're going to say, okay, anything with a score 50 and above, because we've looked at it, we get down below 60 and stuff, there's some things missing, and the Water Development Coordinating Council will kind of, like I said, each year look at that provisional score and kind of say, you know, we feel like this is a good break point for, you need at least this score to be able to be provided funding. That's a busy page. But hopefully it makes sense. And we can come back to it later if anybody has questions. This one probably should have been before. This is the one that shows how much funding, the maximum amount of grant that they can get based on how big the project is. So we're starting to, you know, it starts at 75% grant is available at the start. The minute you start out, the minute your project gets bigger, once it's up to a $10 million project, you can only get 20% in grant. And then it flatlines there. So anything over $10 million, the maximum, and again, these aren't saying you will get that much money. This is the maximum grant amount that you could receive based on, again, and when we want to make clear, this is all draft, and that's what these public meetings are for, to get input and to get in feedback on. This is what is in our plan to recommend to the WDCC recommend for these provisional criteria, because it's all based on what is actually put into that WIF, the Water Infrastructure Fund, and then what happens there. So, and again, this is that example. If $100 million were provided by WIF and $100 million were coming from the other sources, that provides about $200 million for the year. And as we look at that project, breaking it down with those other criteria for the maximum projects, anywhere from 150 to 200 projects, depending on those limitations that are chosen. And this is in that PDF too. It's not broken out with a table, but it explains, this is kind of the recommendations for how those WIF funds are distributed. The thought is that anytime WIF funds are provided, 50% of it would be recommended be divided 40%, 30%, 30%. Over here for the drinking water, 40%, water quality, 30%, water resources, 30%. And then for the remaining 50%, the WDCC would look at the projects and kind of balance it, look at where they're needed the most. And this is, for example, as we looked at what's in this first year, this is kind of how it would be broken down for that other remaining 50% based on what's been submitted now and the criteria that have been set forth. And then this just kind of totals it up to kind of see, based on that $100 million, what percentages are going to each of the different agencies to then distribute to the projects that are on those priority lists that they have. And all this needs to be put into rules. That's the fun part, that we're not gonna. That's going to be happening. It's in the process right now, and those will be made available out, through the Office of Administrative Rules, where you can go in and make comments on those rules. But this kind of outlines what the rules will include, because in the HB 280 it says, if there's an emergency or there's small projects, they don't need to go through this whole process. So now we're defining what is an emergency or what is a small project, because that's all they said. And so we have to define what those are, so that this is an emergency, and there needs to be some criteria set for what is an emergency and where's the threshold for a small project also. And then those other bullet items that will be included in the rules. And like I said, that's a different process, and that will be sending out to the public for their comment on the rules. And it's taking everything that we're getting. We are going to, as much as we can, implement feedback from these public meetings, have that incorporated as much as possible. Doesn't mean we'll be able to address every comment and make everybody happy with what the requests are in their comments. But we will do our best to make it fair and make it a good use of the state's funds, and when those become available. So our next steps, we'll have these public meetings through the end of this month, and then, like Nathan said, that public comment period will be open till mid-November, and then we'll take a couple months to incorporate all those public comments into the finalized UWIP. And then I mentioned the UPP again, is that Utah project portal. Our hope and plan and goal is to have that open so that we can get, we know we missed stuff. It was only open for a month for those initial submittals, but we're going to try, our goal is to have it open again so that people can get in and modify what's been submitted or resubmit projects that weren't submitted in the first place, which will make those numbers grow. We fully expect that the total projects will grow, quite hopefully not doubling and tripling, but we know it'll grow. And then the mandate, the code is that we need to have the UWIP adopted by March 1st. So before that happens, we need to have the draft UWIP sent to the Utah Watersheds Council on June 15th. That's one of the requirements in the House bill. And then with that, when the UWIP's adopted, it'll also, the proposed WIF request will be presented to the legislature in the next legislative session based on everything that comes out of these public meetings, and projects will get submitted, and it's going to be a busy few months. So just a reminder, when you go to the link in the bottom right hand corner, that'll bring up this. You can submit comments. If you have comments now, you can do that. And Isabel is going to be looking at comments and reading them out, and then we'll figure out who's the best to answer them. Our preference is maybe that, so that we have a record of it. If we get done with those and there's discussion, somebody wants to come and say something at the podium, that's welcome too. But that the review process draft, that's the 14-page document I've mentioned a couple of times. They've all had this already, but we'll leave it up as we turn some time over to Isabel to come up with the questions that have been submitted. And we've got, between not just Nathan and I, but we've got Shalane here and some of our consultants here. So whoever has questions and feels they have the best answer, pipe up quick.
People have questions. They just have to come up here.
Is there a mic or? So if they have a comment, they just have to come up to the mic. Okay. Yeah. So well, like I said, we'll have Isabel go through all the questions that have been submitted now, and when that's all said and done, if people have anything else, they can come up to the podium.
Yeah, so for the first question, it says, when will we be able to review our projects submitted and their ranking?
The rank, so able to review, and like for those that have already submitted information, like I mentioned, our goal is by the end of this month or early into November, have that Utah project portal open. They'll be able to get in there and make any revisions that they need. As far as where the projects rank, those will be coming out with the, what is the date for those? Shalane's got her hand going up.
So actually, the plan won't be complete until March, draft in January. But aren't all the projects listed in the relevant agency plans?
Yes.
Already? And are those published online?
They've been provided to the WDCC to be used in preparing the UWIP.
Okay, then let me check and see if those are available to the public.
As far as those haven't been made to public yet.
The relevant agency plans are not public yet, but they are the basis of the Unified Water Infrastructure Plan. And so we are waiting to post till March 1st to post any information, and just want to really make sure that we're following any sort of privacy and not publishing information related to projects for anyone to see. We want to make sure that we really refine this process and make sure that we have it down before all this information is made public.
And if I may, it might be good to comment that, I mean, with this process, it is, the ranking right now is just a draft. And so we're getting public comment, and that ranking process may change. And so that's where that's not being made public because it's not finalized. So hopefully that helps.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Sounds good. This next comment is kind of long, but it says, "We are from a small community and simply cannot compete with surrounding communities and developers in Summit County. We have had many board members over the years, and board members come and go. We don't know if we have submitted proper applications. Where do we find if our community submitted an application? How do we know if we are selected?" And then the comment goes on to say, can you add a few different people to the UWIP list? Which we can. I will make sure we do that. So I guess the questions are, how can they see the information that was submitted, and how do they know if they're selected?
So as far as knowing if it's submitted, I mean, if it's like a city nearby or something that would be submitting for you, you'd have to communicate with them, because when we have this Utah project portal set up, each entity will have their personal login, and they'll be able to see their projects. The intent is not for everybody to see all the different projects in there. It's for them to see theirs, and then when the WDCC and the relevant agencies take those projects and prioritize them and rank them, then those will be incorporated into the UWIP. And when those are made part of the UWIP, then they'll be publicized, and it'll have their rankings and the priorities. And the thought is, and the plan is, the WDCC then ranks those, and it says, based on everything that we've looked at, here's the list of projects that the relevant agencies can then go talk to and notify and say, we have the funding to move forward with your project.
So this was our question from Lake Rockport Estates and sorry, just if it's online.
Oh yeah, we can do it. It's wired.
We can't bring it over. We can't bring it over. So yeah, if you want to have a question.
Sorry, Wendy Aguilar from Lake Rockport Estates. We submitted this question because we have a continuous moving board. We don't even know, our current board has no way of knowing what we have submitted, whether or not we submitted properly. We just need to kind of fill in some blanks so we can make sure that we can be considered for, any funding available. So plus we have new board members, new president, and we're not getting the communication. It's going to someone that is, not as involved as they used to be.
So yeah, with an entity like that, I don't think we have any requirements in the UPP of who is the person that has the data entry. I mean, maybe it should be somebody that's going to be more consistent or more involved throughout the long term.
Correct. We provided her the names.
Okay.
So do you have any idea of, if we submitted for Lake Rockport Estates, is it too late if we're going to, you talked about an application or a change period. If we submitted, can we go in there and provide additional detail and information?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
As soon as this Utah project portal is open, anything that's submitted can be revised and updated.
Okay. How do we find out if we're on that list right now?
I mean, there's what's our email?
It's uwipprojects@utah.gov.
Okay.
UWIP projects. Is there a dash in there?
Is that it up
That's the
there?
website.
Okay.
The email's on the website too. At
Okay.
the bottom of the webpage. This might be a more like we could talk after
Okay.
specifics as well, but whoever submitted your project, there was an email associated with that. So once we get this Utah project portal figured out and live, like you will receive an email
Okay.
for that email that submitted the application if it was submitted.
That sounds
But
good.
we can go and look and see if in the database.
Okay, we'll connect after.
Yeah, we'd probably want you to contact Isabel or
You
send
can
an
contact
email
the UWIP projects email. Yeah.
and say what entity it is and has something been submitted for that. Then we can look up and say, here's the email that we have for that for that entity.
And could possibly change it or add these ones as well to that list. The next question is, how is the state funding this?
That's another topic. Okay, Shalane will take that one.
Do you want to come up here?
Hi, I'm Shalane DiBernardi, an assistant director at the Division of Water Resources. That is such a good question because right now they aren't. The ultimate goal of this is to stop having individual entities come to the legislature directly for a request for appropriation or have to deal with the different agencies. The goal of this is to have one list that's actually been prioritized by the state authorities to say these are the projects that should be funded so that we can go to the legislature with a request for funding. Right now, we're also wrapping up what's been called the fee study associated with HB 280 to determine if there should be new user fees and or taxes to help fund this water infrastructure fund. Ultimately, it comes down to if the legislature decides to appropriate new funding for water infrastructure projects. So right now, there is no new funding. I take that back. There was one thing. We did an integration of existing funds study as part of this last year, and the Board of Water Resources gave up their city's water loan fund that was consolidated into the water infrastructure fund, which was also given an initial appropriation of, I want to say, $2.5 million. So I think right now it has about $6 million in it. That's not going to go far, as you saw the list of hundreds of millions needed. But we are hopeful that once we go through this process and create a plan, there will be a reason for the legislature to fund this. One of the things they required as part of the fee study is to compare this process to the transportation funding process. So we have tried to highlight that everybody knows water and transportation are not the same. Water is owned by thousands of different entities. Most of the highways are owned by one. So they get to go and say, this is the funding we need. So that's why we're trying to make this process similarly efficient, but realizing it's not the same. So.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question. But as part of these public meetings are for the prioritization process, because those are kind of tie into how much we're recommending. So, this impacts how much is recommended, but as far as how much is provided, that's a different story.
Yes, thank you. The next question is, how will the calculation of MAGI and that portion of ranking work with agricultural projects?
Who's over there? Is it Colin here? Well, I'll try to answer that. And if somebody has different clarification, let me know. I mean, that's they don't have that. I mean, they're irrigation companies. So we're kind of looking at that. We're kind of basically maybe saying that criteria does not apply to agriculture because there's no way to calculate it. Every irrigation company assesses shares and costs differently. So the concept is that will not be used in their as far as their calculation for the one of the criteria. Yes, please.
So on that note, if you have suggestions for how to prioritize agricultural projects, we are open to suggestions because we understand user fees, Magi isn't exactly the same for ag, but we still think they need, well, they're part of the statute. We want them to be part of the process and included. So we are looking at ways to make them eligible for WIF grants through public benefits, whether it's conservation or recreation or other things that could be that an ag project could offer up, since they don't have the same opportunities or capabilities that municipal projects might have. But we've met with multiple agricultural representatives, and we're taking all the comment in that we can. So very open to suggestions.
The next question is, what year is funding available?
So everything's set up so that whatever funding is available in the next legislative session would be available for the fiscal year 2027. And that's all dependent on how much they make available. Anything else on that? Or okay.
And the next question is, I've heard that watershed councils would have an input on project ranking. Is this true?
Watershed councils on project ranking. That does not sound familiar to me. I mean, here comes Shalane again. Thanks, Shalane.
So that was discussed through part of the fee study process. And as we keep saying, we're working on this process as we're required to complete it. Our boss has one of the sayings that we've all kind of taken, is that we're building this airplane as it's about to take off, because that's what we feel like we're doing. We don't know exactly how this is going to work, but we're trying to put it all together. The fee study has been separate, but a cooperative process through this. If there is a way for watershed councils to have some input, I think we would be looking for their input. That's part of the reason we are taking, I mean, it's required by code, but we will be taking this draft plan to the State Watersheds Council and asking for their input. But for this first round, I don't know that we'll have an opportunity for the individual watershed councils to provide input directly to the prioritization and ranking of projects in their area. But we absolutely would be open to local and regional input.
Will we get to add projects every year to the list?
Yeah, the plan is once that Utah project portal is open, you can add projects anytime. And conceptually, you can add them anytime. And like I said earlier, we'll kind of each year we'll say, and we'll notify, everybody that's got an email with their project, we'll send it out, say, just remember by such and such a date, and we don't know what that is, that's still kind of in the process, we'll have a shut-off date, and maybe we'll close it for a couple weeks just so that we're still figuring it out. But there'll be a date. It'll be pretty much able to enter and update information on the go.
And I will say, if anyone wants to be a part of that UWIP projects at utah.gov, that's where we're planning to send out any updates, deadlines, new information. So also on that question and comment form, there's a question that says, would you like your email to be added? So even if you don't have any questions or comments, that's a place you could elect to be a part of this list. The next question is, Senator Curtis is partnering with a nonpartisan colleague on water bill at the federal level. Do you anticipate any federal funding opportunities, or is that kept separately?
It'll be separate. And everything tied into this is with the state bills, and I know that drinking water and water quality, they have federal funds that are tied into other stuff, but everything tied into the UWIP is for state funds only. Well, I think the intent is to keep it separate. Anything different?
Just a follow-up to that.
You can come up. Sorry, we don't have a portable one.
Sorry, don't want to monopolize everyone's times, but
You have good questions? Might be in someone else's head, so thanks.
no, I understand that he is working on this bill. So if they keep it separate, do we have to pursue federal funding differently, or how does that work? I mean, sorry, we're new to this, so we're trying to dissect and figure everything out. So any help, guidance that you can provide would help. So does the federal have their own application process overall?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give it a shot and somebody can clear it up. But for federal funds, they'll have their own process. It'll be completely separate, because then in our application in this portal, it'll say how much are you expecting to get from other funding sources. Because it'll list how much you're planning to pay, what other grants you have, just so that we can kind of get a feel for what other efforts are being made to get other funding and how much is going to be needed from the state. But they will be application process completely separated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I might have missed it, but is this currently a one-time program, or will this same thing happen every 5 or 10 years or something?
So yeah, this will be an ongoing. The relevant agency plans I mentioned will be updated annually, and then the UWIP is required to be updated at least every 4 years.
The original plan has to go out at least 20.
Oh, so yeah, it's asking for projects submitted that are going to be anticipated over the next 20 years. So the plan will kind of look into that 20-year window. Then the next 4 years, it'll be looking out it'll always be looking out 20 years.
How will regional wholesalers or conservancy districts be prioritized, in parentheses, in lieu of usage rates as a % of MAGI, when they are applying for funds in the same category as a retail or municipal supplier?
Who has a good answer for that one?
I think the plan is to consider what percentage of their taxing capacity they are using. So as we'll be looking at municipalities as a percentage of MAGI, for those with taxing authority, we'll be looking to see how much of that authority you're using. So.
Thanks.
Is the funding and application for dam safety being rolled into this process as well?
So anything that's under the dam safety, they have a separate priority list where it's bringing it up to current standards based on their rankings. That's a totally separate item that receives grant funds through the Division of Water Resources. I mean, if it's maintenance work for a dam or something that's not part of the dam safety program, they could submit it. But if it's for the dam safety upgrade, bringing things up to current standards on the dam safety's priority list, that's separate, not tied into this at all.
One second. If the district or municipality that I live in is funding their projects, Why should I be responsible to pay for a project outside of the area I live in?
That's a good question. Have you dealt with this stuff enough in your life? You got a good answer for that?
Yeah, I don't have a very good answer for that, but I do know, there are, just like with comparing this to the road transportation projects, many people do travel and drink water throughout the state at different water systems. So there is one benefit there. But I think that is one big hurdle that will have to be overcome for this funding, is just that concept. And so I know those will be some pretty big discussions moving forward in the future.
Thanks.
If the water system doesn't plan on needing state funding, should they still submit projects?
They don't have to. I guess it kind of some thoughts we've heard is, Shalane mentioned this fee study where it's looking at there might be a tax, so there might be a what was the other, or a fee, user fee. If you think that might impact how you fund things in the future, you should probably get it on the list. But yeah, basically, if you want state funding, you need to be on the list. If you don't think you'll need it at all, you don't need to. I mean, it's not nothing's required to be on this list unless you want some money from the state.
And I'll just add that if the WIF is funded as the WDCC requests, it is expected that WIF funds will be provided as grants. So while most of the existing state authorities are revolving funds provided as loans that have to be repaid over time, new WIF funds would be grants. Now, it may be a small portion of your project, but free money is free money. And if you're high on the list and it's available, it's worth getting your project on that list if that funding becomes available. That's my suggestion. So even if you think you don't need state funds, if you have a water project, we would like to know about it. So I'd encourage you to get it in the list.
And if I can add and just support that, I know with drinking water systems, we have, close to like 1,100, 1,200 systems throughout the state. And some of those are, small, transient, non-community systems. But I think for the number of projects submitted for drinking water projects through this effort, there were like just close to 300. And so that's just a small fraction of the public water systems submitting through this portal or submitting projects. And it's our recommendation. If you have projects, submit to the list. That opens the door for potential funding down the road. But it helps us know what the demand is and what the impact is statewide for water infrastructure.
Will this funding have project requirements that are similar to federally funded projects, like Buy America and Davis-Bacon?
I don't know. It will not. Basically, how the funding currently is from the different relevant agencies will be the same, which don't have any of those in place.
Can you give us an idea of how in-depth the capital asset management plan will be, and if the requirements for that will differ some for irrigation or canal companies?
I'm not too familiar with the capital asset plans, so are you familiar with those, Shalane? Or do you have those with your stuff? You're more familiar with them?
So I know that is required for drinking water projects, for master planning, and capital asset planning as part of that. But I'm not familiar with, irrigation and agricultural projects. But imagine that could be mirrored, or that process could be copied over if that's not used by the canal companies and agricultural districts. So I don't have a lot of experience with that, so kind of maybe don't have a good answer.
No, but we could help.
Yeah, if there's an agency that they want to work with, we can help kind of clarify what's needed. The rules are kind of, and a capital asset plan is already in the rules, but as far as how that ties into agriculture, to an irrigation company or entities such as that.
And we do have state water planners for Water Resources, Division of Drinking Water, and Department of Ag. And those water planners can assist with that capital facility and infrastructure planning. And so I think that would be a good resource with the Department of Ag, state water planner, to lean on that person to help with that topic.
That is all the questions I see right now coming in.
All right. That's all the questions submitted. Thank you very much, Isabel. Is there anybody here that has any clarifications or wants to review anything or has comments that they want to add? If so, come on up to the speaker.
Can I go one more time?
I had a feeling.
You're so nice. Thank you. So my question is kind of very broad. When does the state of Utah or all of these divisions that you're talking about, when do you guys get involved to say, guess what, community, you're not meeting the requirements or the standards? We have 139 full-time residents on the community in the mountain that we live in. And that affects several hundred people. That's their families. We don't have a year-round water source. We live off water tanks. We can't issue building permits because we're limited on water. We just found out that our well that we thought produced 90 gallons per minute only produces 30 to 35 gallons per minute. And that includes the yield. So there's some concern. Our fire hydrants are not charged. They don't work 6 months out of the year. That's a health and safety component. When does the state get involved with communities and say, okay, time out, you guys, you need to start moving in this direction?
Yeah, I know since you're a drinking water system, I can probably address that. As a division of drinking water, we do, we call them sanitary surveys, where we go out and assess, have a person physically inspect a water system and look for deficiencies. We call that our improvement priority system. So there are deficiency points. And, the more points, a water system can become an unapproved water system,
Mm-hmm.
and there's consequences for that. And, we do have resources through our drinking water board. But those bigger significant deficiencies that affect public health, our division steps in and, we have resources, technical assistance to make sure that, public health is being met and protected.
Right. I don't want to put our community at risk, but we are. We need help. We need some guidance. We need some intervention. We're having a heck of a time convincing some of our members that we need to move in this direction, but we need to move in this direction. Can you help us, relay that need and that information and be able to speak to why moving to a water system and have a reliable source of water could be helpful to our community?
Yeah, I can meet with your board or your community. And I know we've met previously, and, as a division, we try to promote consolidation, regionalization. And that's definitely where your water system would benefit from that with combining with Mountain Regional.
Correct.
But it is very costly, as you've done the cost analysis on that. But as a division, we can help provide technical assistance and provide support and education to the community members to help move the needle and move in that direction. to help support joining Mountain Regional, where you can become a year-round water system.
Great. Great. Thank you, Nathan. We'll definitely be in contact because we need your help. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. And I think unless any other questions have been
There was
submitted.
one more.
Okay.
So just before we close the meeting, can you have a project that is partially funded by this program and partially funded by the state revolving fund?
Yes, and that's the way this program is set up, and especially like with drinking water with the state revolving fund, that is a component to this funding, and so that is for all the three. What was the term for the three? The three relevant agencies have their funding sources, and that is expected to be a funding component to the infrastructure projects. Okay. And so with not having any additional questions, we thank you for joining in person and virtually, but encourage you to continue to submit questions and feedback. There are still a lot of unanswered questions. We do want public involvement to help shape how this process is being done. And so if you have input, comments, please share that. And you can even email. If it doesn't fit the format of the online form, you can even probably send an email to the UWIP email. But again, thank you for participating. Very much appreciated, and have a safe drive home.